So we've located a property we believe would make a good investment. So what happens now? How do we make an offer and what areas should we focus on? Hi, thanks for joining me in this video. My name's Tim. I'm a property investment advisor and property investment educator. Now, over the years, I've acquired several properties for myself as a property investor, and I've also helped hundreds of my clients acquire properties. And the process of running through doing our homework and qualifying a property or a suitable property as an investment is pretty much theory. It's really working through the research, understanding the numbers, et cetera, et cetera. And that's all stuff we can do on our own in the safety of our own home. But when it comes to actually making that next step to acquiring the property, that's when it gets real, and it's the practical process of part of that process of acquiring that property. And for a lot of people, it can be daunting. So in this video, I'm going to run through some of the ways that may make that process easier for you. It certainly has helped myself and the clients I've worked with just get more of an understanding of the things we can control and what we can't control, and focus on, again, those areas that we can control, and not worry and concern ourselves too much about the other areas that we can't control. Okay, so there's two things here. One is making an offer. The other is negotiating the price. So if a property's advertised for sale for, say, just for the exercise, 452,000, and you make an offer of 452,000, then there's no negotiating in that process. You're basically saying to the vendor or to the vendor's agents, I'm willing to pay the asking price. So that may occur if you believe that it's a market in which there's a lot of buyers around, so you want to secure that property, and the purchase price works for you as far as borrowing capacity and also the rent return you get in as a relationship to that purchase price. Then the cash flow of that position of that property works for you, then that could be your strategy. I don't want to muck around with negotiating. I'm happy with that purchase price. It works for me. I've done my homework. I know it's in a good area. The asking price is fair, and I don't want to waste any more time running around researching other properties, so it may work for you that way. Again, the other way is negotiating the price. So that's where effectively you are saying, I'm not going to offer the asking price. I'm actually going to look to see if I can have an offer accepted below that asking price. So we're going to look at a few things here around what we can control and what effectively is out of our control, and how do we bring that into terms that we can work with and make that our job of acquiring that property less stressful and smoother as well, because obviously there's a time factor involved in going through this process, and our time as well as the agent's time and the vendor's time. So let's have a look at some of those areas that we can control and others that we can't control. So when we're negotiating any deal, effectively what we're looking to achieve is a win-win outcome. So the vendor's happy and the buyer's happy. So if we can achieve that balance and both parties walk away feeling that they've achieved an outcome that they're satisfied with, then that's the ultimate position that we want to get to. Now, with negotiating, typically we either negotiate on price or on terms. Unusual or unlikely that you're going to get to negotiate and leverage off both on terms and price. So as an example, if we're going to make a low offer, which would be negotiate on the price, then we'd have to come up with terms that would be agreeable to the vendor. So for example, it might be, I'm going to put in a low offer, however, I'm a cash buyer and I can settle straight away. So those terms might work for the vendor, knowing that they're going to get a sale very quickly. As an example of negotiating on terms, it could be that for whatever reason, it might be part of our strategy, a property investment strategy, that we need or would like to have an extended settlement. So rather than settling in a month's time, we want to settle 6 months down the track, so an extended settlement process. That could be, again, to meet our strategy in some way. I've had work with investors that have done that and done it quite successfully. So if we're going to do that, then we'd need to then work with the vendor and giving something back to them. So it could be that in our interest, again, with this strategy, that by extending the settlement, that it's worth us paying a little bit more than the asking price just to sweeten the deal, if you like, or again, to get that win-win outcome. Other examples of negotiating on terms could be that the property is listed without such things as dishwashers, washing machines, dryers, etc. So as an investment property, we may feel that having those included in the contract or in the sale, that would be a benefit to us. So we may then say to the vendor, look, if you leave those items in the property and include as part of the sale, then we're willing to offer a little bit more. What that may look like. So again, negotiating on price, negotiating on terms, very difficult and very unlikely you're going to get both happening at the same time. So if you focus on one, then we need to sweeten the other side again to get that win-win outcome. Now, when we're approaching this process, we really need to, as investors, do so with a commercial frame of mind, if you like. So it's a commercial approach. It's all about the numbers. We're not acquiring this investment property to live in. Maybe part of your strategy that you do that down the road. So that's a different thing. But for most investors, will never live in the investment properties that we acquire. So it needs to be all about the numbers. It really needs to be something that we don't deviate from too much, because at the end of the day, we need to acquire investment properties that work for us financially. They meet our affordability. So what we think of the property doesn't always come into it. If the market loves it, then that's the type of property we're acquiring. So if you would never live in an apartment, but the area that you're investing is, that's what the market wants, then that's what the market wants. So you find out what the market wants, you go and get it and give it to them. So we need to maintain that commercial approach always. Obviously sometimes a little bit of emotion comes in it, but really their main focus needs to be around the numbers. The other thing that we need to make sure that we do is that by having that commercial approach, then we're willing to walk away. So if we can't get the purchase on our terms, as far as what the numbers look like, purchase price needs to be a certain amount, no more, because then the rent return that we're going to get, it means that the cash flow position of that property will be outside of our affordability range. Then we really need to make sure that we're willing to walk away. And there's a saying that says that the deal of a lifetime comes around once a week. So don't be afraid to walk away if the numbers don't work. So another area we can control through research is getting an understanding of the market value of the properties getting advertised. And we can do this by looking at recent comparable sales. And by recent, I mean no older than 3 to 6 months, because obviously the market can change in that time. And comparable property, so obviously if you're looking at a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, then you want to be looking at what 3-bed, 2-bath homes have sold recently in that area as well, to get a very good, comparing apples with apples. Sometimes vendors aren't in a hurry to sell, so they might say, yes, well, we know properties similar to mine have been selling for 450,000, but we're going to advertise this one at 470,000. We're going to put our property on the market for a higher amount just to see what bites, if you like. So we want to make sure that we're not paying overs, obviously, for a property. We can also get an understanding of what chance we have to negotiate on the purchase price by how long the property's been on the market for. So if it's been only recently listed, then it's probably likely that the vendor and the agent will say, well, thanks for your offer, but we'll advertise it, leave it sitting for a little bit longer just to see what sort of other offers come in. If it's been on the market for sale for a long time, then that would suggest that we've probably got a lot more room to negotiate on the purchase price. So understanding what the market value of that property is something we can control. And again, we need to, as investors, do that research around that area, obviously with the numbers as well, but certainly around that purchase price, because we don't want to pay overs for a property. If we end up, again, as that example I used before, acquiring that property at 470,000 when it was really the market value is 450, then we basically need that property to grow in value to actually get up to that value that we pay, that amount that we pay for it. So we basically acquired a property for $20,000 more than it's worth, if I can say that. So yeah, again, doing a little bit of research around that to understand what the true market value of the property is goes a long way in making sure that we're going to get a good deal for ourselves. Now, when we're making offers, it's very likely that we're going to be communicating with the selling agent. On the odd occasion, you might find a property that you're interested in that is for sale by the owner, but for the most part, you'll be dealing with a real estate agent. So I've always found, and certainly dealing with my clients and working with my clients, I've found that it's really helpful to state your position early with the real estate agent and selling agent. So to let them know that you're acquiring, you're interested in this property as an investment, not something to move into. And you'll find the conversation will flow differently, because the agent will be very, will understand that, you should understand that you're not emotionally involved with this purchase. And that way you'll be talking about, it's about the numbers. Obviously, you want to know that how the property suits the market, and through your research, most likely you should have already established what that looks like. But you want to keep the agent on your side. You want to be polite and courteous. Obviously, even if you don't move ahead with the particular deal you're talking about at the time, it may be that you need to deal with that agent down the road. So you're not being rude when you present your position. All you're doing is making it clear that it is for investment purposes, not for moving into or not an owner-occupied purchase. The other thing that we can do when we're discussing with the real estate agent is to let them know that we do have other properties in mind. So again, the focus is not purely on this, all your eggs aren't in one basket. And that does help you as an investor as well, because it frees up your mind to say, well, if this doesn't work, then I've got other ones that are equally as good. Now, another area that sort of crosses over between what we can control and what we can't control is dealing with the real estate agent. And obviously the real estate agent is being engaged by the seller to sell the house on behalf of them. So it would make sense then that the real estate agent is looking to get the best possible outcome for their clients. What we want to try and do is get the best possible outcome for us, which means trying to get the property as cheaply as we can. So what we can do is ask the questions anyway. So we can find out then whether the real estate agent's willing to disclose information around that would help us get an understanding of whether we can put in a lower offer or indeed have a lower offer accepted. So we're looking to find out what the motivation of the seller is. How quickly do they need to sell? I've had agents tell me that, look, if you're a serious buyer, to be honest with you, we're getting close now to the vendors needing to start another job in another state, start a new job in another state, and therefore, if you are serious, then there's a potential to acquire the property for less than the asking price. It could be that the owners of the property have passed away and their children or the beneficiaries of that asset don't want it, so they're willing to sell the property at less than perhaps its market value. So there's a number of reasons why the vendors could be motivated. Getting that information out of the real estate agent will vary from real estate agent to real estate agent. However, again, it's worth asking or trying to find out, establish that information that will then lead us or help us establish whether we've got the position to negotiate. Because once you've made an offer, it's very, very unlikely you're going to be able to make an offer lower than that first offer. So you don't want to really jump in and make an offer and then find out later, well, I could have got that property a lot cheaper. So so once you've made an offer, you can always increase your offer, but to actually decrease the offer is very unlikely. So trying to establish our position around how likely it is that the vendor will accept a lower offer is something that we can try for. Not always it's going to work out. As I say, the agent is really trying, if they're doing their job properly, is looking to get the best possible outcome for their client, the vendor. So we've got to keep that in mind, that they may be holding information back, which they legally don't have to disclose to us. But if we can find out a little bit more around why the vendor's looking to sell, then that can go a long way to us perhaps getting a property for less than we thought we might get it, and therefore then the cash flow position of that property and the equity in that property is going to be better than if we had offered the full price, the asking price. Having pre-approval in place regarding finance is something that we can control and can put us in a very strong position when it comes to making offers and certainly negotiating on purchase price. So this goes back to negotiating on price and terms. If we have finance approval, meaning that we're approved by the lender right up to a point of having the security or the property that we're acquiring accepted by the lender, then we are about 2 weeks down the track as far as the time it takes to get the purchase process involving coming to an outcome. So if we state to real estate agent, obviously that information is going to be passed on to the vendor, that we are pre-approved, have finance in place, then that puts us again in a stronger position because if I'm putting an offer in and I don't have finance approved, you put in the same offer or even slightly less than I put in, but you do have pre-approval in place, then there's a good chance that you'll have your offer accepted over mine because if they accept my offer and it happens to be a little bit higher than yours, they are still unsure as to whether the lender is going to provide finance to me to go through to settlement of that property. So again, that's something we can control, and particularly in a market where it's a seller's market, where there's a lot of buyers around, often the vendor and the real estate agent will sort of categorise the potential purchasers, and certainly you'll get pushed to the top if you have finance in place. So it's really worth, and it's something we can control, and it's really worth not only for your position around having your offer accepted, but also for yourself knowing that you are going shopping and making offers on properties that you very likely to have finance approved for. There's no point. It is frustrating and it can be very disappointing if you have a property offer accepted, but then you later find out that the lender won't borrow or lend you, I should say, that amount of money, and you've got to start that process all over again. So something we can control is that pre-approval, and very, very worthwhile sitting down with a finance professional and establishing what that looks like for you. Acquiring property via auction process is something we have to understand that within that process, there's things that we can't control. They're set, if you like. So it does vary from state to state, but typically at an auction, if you're a successful bidder, then you generally require to hand over a 10% deposit within a couple of days of the auction or the auction completing, and typically again around about 4 weeks after that auction date is the settlement date. So effectively what is assumed is that you've had your finance approved, you've got funds to hand over, available to hand over the deposit, 10% deposit. Building and pest reports have been done, and if you are looking to get an independent valuation on the property, that needs to be done and is assumed that you've done all those things prior to the auction date. So the thing that you can control, obviously, is making the offers. So once the price of the bidding gets to a certain point that's above what you're willing to pay, then you can pull out. But when it comes to the terms, they're often set. So something to be aware of. The auction process is different than a non-auction process, selling process. So just some things to be aware of that, that we don't want to be caught out on. And once they fall the hammer, if you're a successful bidder, then it's assumed that you can go ahead and you're in a position to complete that sales process. Okay, so we make an offer. What happens from there is that the real estate agent will then present that offer to their clients, being the sellers. Now, the sellers got three options really. They'll either accept your offer, which is great, and that means we've agreed on that sale price or the purchase price, and the process moves forward from there. They can reject your offer and say, no, that's it, I'm not budging on that price or that original sale price. Or they can, in a way, reject your offer, but they come back with a counter offer. So they're saying, look, we're willing to come below our original asking price, but we're not willing to go as low as your offer. So once that happens, if there's a counter offer, then the ball's in our court then. So we can either accept that counter offer, or we can reject it and say, no, that's as high as we're going to go. Or we can, again, counter offer and say, well, we're not happy with that price. We're happy with this price. It was a little bit higher than we our original offer, and the game gets played out from there. So what we have to do as investors is obviously put a value on our time and determine how much time we want to invest in this negotiation game. And, you don't want to get it out of hand and get silly, but, if you're going back and forth in $100 increments, then you're probably maybe overplaying the game a little bit. But certainly that's the process goes through. So the first offer is presented, your offer is presented, and then we have to sit back then and wait to see what the vendor does. And again, they've got those three options: either accept it, reject it, or counter offer it, and then comes back to us and we play that game again until we get to an outcome that we're both happy with. Obviously, it's a commercial approach for us. we need to achieve a purchase price that allows the numbers to work to our affordability, but on the other hand, the vendors may need a certain sale price to enable them to do what they need to do. So the game can play out or can be finished in a matter of 10 minutes, or could play out over weeks, depending on, again, how much time you want to invest into the game of negotiating. Okay, so making offers and negotiating is a process. Within that process, there's areas that we can control and some that we can't control. Now, as investors, what does give us confidence is understanding that those elements that we can control have far more influence over whether we're going to be successful or not than those areas that we can't control. So understanding what our rules are, knowing what our maximum purchase price is, relationship to the rent, to make sure that the properties that we acquire cash flow to our affordability. We also want to make sure that when we've done our research around that property, that it's in an area or growth area, and also too that's the type of property the market wants. All those things will go a long way to assuring that we acquire good quality property. It's not a difficult thing, but it's easy to do. It's easy not to do. But those elements that we can control are the main ones around knowing whether we continue with the process or whether we exit the process and move on to another deal. So look, I really do appreciate you spending time watching this video, and I really do hope that it's given you some confidence and a little bit more understanding what that process looks like around making offers, and certainly if you're going to negotiate, how that looks like, or what that looks like for us as investors, and that it's a two-player game, and we need to make sure, or try and endeavour, that we're going to get a win-win outcome. So look, thanks again for watching this video, and all the best with your journey.